Hi, it's Julie in Michigan. If you hadn't guessed, I'm Julie. I'm still in Michigan. And I'm going to read another chapter for you from the Poison Pen Pal. Um, I don't know, I just really like this story because I went in search of genealogy and found myself at a library in Kendallville, Indiana, reading the newspapers from 1908 when I got the idea for this series, the Kendallville Librarian. Some current events, pretty interesting for that small town back then. There was a lot happening in 1908 in Kendallville, Indiana. I did not have any idea. Um, One is the basis for my story, at least the first chapter or first book one that I'm reading now, but also because there was a global auto race that went through Kendallville, Indiana in 1908 during like the worst blizzard of the century, some say. I think it was 7 or 8 cars, automobiles, left New York City in February. There was a German entry, an Italian, a French, an American. It seems like there was somebody else. They left New York City in February. They traveled to the West Coast of the United States when there was just no roads, no gasoline stations. Gasoline was sold in hardware stores, and no roads, no asphalt. Horses went along with wagons because they'd have to pull these cars out of the ruts of mud and ick, and it was cold, and they didn't have covers, and phew, what a journey. Anyways, they actually went through Kendallville, Indiana. So I made a little bit more of an event for the citizens of that city than actually happened. I don't think they stayed overnight. And in my story, I have them there for the weekend because we're going to have a little bit of interaction with one of my characters, Sarah and Lydia. So I'm going to go ahead and read. We're 2 minutes into this video. I'm going to go ahead and read chapter 4 from Lydia's point of view. She's pretty upset with this situation at work. So here we go. Oh, actually, this is chapter 3. I'm sorry. Chapter 3, Lydia. On Monday, it was snowing steadily as I made my way to work. I was usually among the first to arrive. It was Henry's job to start the fire, but I was to have coffee ready when the men came. It didn't seem fair, but all my attempts at raising my position so far had been to no avail. I was near the end of my rope and desperate for a solution. I would try one more time with Mr. Bradley when he came in. I knew I was doing well to find employment. The opportunities for ladies were limited, and I couldn't see myself in ribbons and lace working in one of the dry goods shops. Sarah enjoyed her work as a town librarian, but there was only need for one person in that position. I liked my job because it gave me a chance to be at the newspaper unnoticed. I would hear the local gossip, the parts left over from the local tavern the night before, and the news ladies rarely got to hear. If it was juicy, the men might cluster and talk in low voices, but my hearing was well attuned. I wanted to know what was going on. The Western Union machine clattered as it churned out Associated Press articles from all over the country. There was an air of excitement this week since the auto race traveling from New York City had left Ohio and would be here in a few days. A blizzard was nigh upon us at the time. I worried about the horseless carriages these men would use. The drivers had encountered plenty of trouble already traveling in areas without roads. Reporters, photographers, and mechanics traveled alongside on horses or with wagons. I heard they often needed the animals to dig their motor cars out of snow and mud. Hey, Lydia, get us some more coffee. We got work to do. The fact that it was Valentine's Day was of no occasion for the men. They would have plans with their wives and girlfriends after work, but paid no heed to the conversations among the typewriters, of which I was one. A few women had made simple cards for their friends, but I was not close with any of them since I'd only been working here with them less than 6 months. My Valentine's celebration would be that evening with Sarah. I hustled to get the pot filled with fresh water from the cistern. The clattering of typewriter keys and thumping of the printing press filled the room. Piles of papers lined our desk as the men put their heads together, telling their stories, and the women scurried furiously between the stenography machines and the typewriters. We listened to their tales as we transcribed them. Then we cleared up confusing language and improper grammar. The editor, turn the page here. The editor looked them over, and with his seal of approval, we took the typed sheets to the printing press where Henry worked. He performed the magic that turned a sheet of typed paper into a page of newspaper stock. Mornings were busy as the orphan boys lined up, waiting for a load to sell on the street corners. Hey, looky here! Earl pulled the sheets from the telegraph machine. The men gathered to see with interest. I wiped off the table and dusted behind them, listening to what had caught their interest. It's Cora. Whoa, that doesn't look like Cora. That's a man. Oh, wait, what did she do? They looked to see me lingering. Lydia, you can go start typing that story on your desk now. The table's clean enough. I followed his direction, but kept listening. Boy, did I have an earful for Sarah. I could hardly wait to tell her all about it this evening. When the opportunity arose, I approached my boss. His face, as doughy as the whole wheat bread from Amanda's bakery, led one to suspect him to be a kindly person. However, I knew behind the soft exterior he was a stern taskmaster. His suit had wrinkled from the hours he spent sitting at his desk, and was probably the same one he'd worn about every day since I'd been here. Mr. Bradley, did you think any more about what I asked? He looked surprised to see me for a minute. He'd been looking out the window. It's really coming down, isn't it? I nodded in agreement. What did you think about it? He wrinkled his brow into a frown. What's that? I wondered if you thought any more about letting me be a reporter. Go get the stories. I told you before, that's a man's job, and we need you here as a typewriter. I meant to tell you, my nephew will come in from Missouri soon. I hope he's here by the time the auto race arrives. I want him out there interviewing the drivers and getting pictures. Why won't you let me? I'm here and I can do it. Like I told you, I'm not afraid of getting outside. I was raised in the country and I'm used to farm hands and horses. He went on as though he hadn't heard me. It's no place for ladies out there with mud and horses and men. You do not know how men talk when ladies aren't present. We need those fresh comments, unhindered by the niceties ladies require. We can't have you doing a man's job. My blood boiled. His nephew from out of town would do the job I'd asked for, and I was standing right there, a loyal typewriter for the paper since Sarah and I had arrived. It was no use telling him the lack of niceties in my family growing up. The newspaper business struck me as exciting, but I was stuck behind the scenes, typing men's stories, making them coffee, and keeping the fires going. This couldn't be. I had plenty to say, but I bit my tongue to avoid voicing my thoughts. It was everything I could do to keep my mouth shut. I sat eating my lunch that day that Mrs. Beasley let me pack in her busy kitchen. It was a hearty midday meal, homemade bread with a nice slice of cold ham and some pickles she'd put up. I could barely contain my excitement. Had I heard correctly this morning? I was very interested in Cora, especially when I heard the men discussing the situation as though it had happened before. In fact, by the time they had gone on to other topics, I knew this was a common set of circumstances. When they caught women passing as men, it was big trouble, and often potential trouble with the law. But apparently there were many married couples living about that were not made up of an authentic man and a woman. Rather, a woman took on the role of husband, earning men's wages, performing work preserved solely for the masculine sex. I imagine worked harder that day than I did. Considering the possibilities, I could hardly wait to share this idea with Sarah. The nephew's arrival soon overshadowed any moment of inspiration. He was a dandy, an earnest looking young man, a real Weisenheimer, dolled up in top dollar finery. I detested him on sight. I had seen his type before, visiting our town, staying at the hotel, and acting as though the world existed for his comfort alone. Mr. Bradley introduced the young fellow to the men who had stood around near the stove after they returned from lunch. The men got the stories, and the ladies got the work. Apparently, the owner didn't find it necessary to introduce us ladies until all the men were acquainted. When it was time for our introductions, he merely brought his nephew to our corner of the room and waited for us to stop what we were doing and look his way. Ladies, I would like to introduce my nephew Thomas. He will join our staff as a junior reporter. They have schooled him in Missouri, and he brings his talents to our little community to be a well qualified addition to the staff. He then smiled broadly and placed his hand behind his nephew's back. We ladies all smiled because we knew the role we must play. The youngster gave us a cocky one back, and I imagined the grief he would give the youngest, most attractive women in our group. There was no need, apparently, for our names to be used in the introduction, based on our proximity to the machines we used in our work, and the introductions made clear his higher authority. I dug my fingernails into the palm of my hands and held them close to my sides. It was all I could do to keep from standing up and introducing myself as the one who should hold his nephew's position. I knew that would make me a laughing stock as they ushered me from the building, and some days I might not care. But I wasn't ready to lose my job yet. I had to think of a plan. The two men walked away and returned to the huddle by the stove as I returned to my focus on my typewriter. I pulled the blanket tighter around my legs and snuggled my feet into the border which hung below my skirts. I hoped I would not be called upon to further walk about the cold room and prepare more coffee. If so, I was likely to spill some on the men's heads. Hopefully, they would soon all go out somewhere to get more stories. This would allow the ladies I worked with to engage in small, polite conversations if we kept our voices low so that Mr. Bradley would not need to come out and yell for us to be quiet if we desired to keep our jobs. For today, that was my intention. I planned out my evening's activities while I continued to correct the many grammatical errors by the reporters. My mind was busy thinking of trying this Cora thing. And with that, I'm going to stop because we're at 13 minutes. And I think that's plenty long enough. I don't know. 13 minutes might even be pushing it. So, as always, like and subscribe, leave a comment, ask a question. Tell me this couldn't happen. It wasn't like that in 1908. Whatever. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm okay. I'm okay with it. Just let me know. Let me know you're here and listening. I want to hear from you. Talk to you soon. Bye.